The first time it happened, everyone thought it was just a badly trained dog. The German shepherd stepped in front of his owner, planting his paws wide, body stiff, eyes locked ahead. The leash tightened as the man tried to move forward, confused and a little embarrassed. "Easy," he whispered, giving a small tug, but the dog didn't budge. He leaned back harder, blocking the path with his entire body, as if his owner was about to walk straight into danger. People nearby stared. Some smiled. Others shook their heads. To them, it looked like a stubborn German shepherd acting out in public. But what no one understood in that moment was that this wasn't disobedience. It wasn't fear. And it definitely wasn't random. Something had triggered the dog. Something he couldn't ignore. Something that made every instinct inside him scream to stop the man he loved. The owner, a quiet man in his early 30s, wasn't used to attention. He had adopted the German shepherd from a rescue program not long ago, drawn to the dog's calm nature and sharp intelligence. The dog had a past, though the details were vague. Some training, some discipline, a history that wasn't fully written down on paper. But what mattered most was the bond that had formed quickly between them. The dog trusted him completely, and the man trusted the dog. That's why this moment felt strange. They were just walking like they did every evening. Same route, same pace, same sound of traffic and distant voices. Nothing looked out of place. And yet, the German shepherd refused to move forward. His ears were alert, angled just slightly, catching something no human seemed to notice. His breathing was steady, controlled. This wasn't panic. This was focus. The man tried again, stepping to the side. Instantly, the dog mirrored him, blocking the new path just as firmly. A low sound escaped the dog's chest, not a growl, but a warning hum, the kind that says, "Please don't make me choose between obedience and protection." The man stopped walking altogether now, heart beginning to beat faster. That was when a police patrol car slowed nearby. The officers had been watching from a distance, trained eyes catching the unusual behavior. A German shepherd refusing commands was never something to ignore, especially when the dog's posture looked more defensive than aggressive. One officer stepped out slowly, hand relaxed, voice calm. He'd worked with K-9 units before. He knew this breed well. "Everything okay here?" the officer asked. The owner nodded, though his face showed uncertainty. "He's never done this before," he said quietly, glancing down at the dog. "He just won't let me walk." The German shepherd didn't take his eyes off the space ahead. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He stood like a wall, muscles tight, tail low but steady. To a trained eye, it looked less like a problem dog and more like a sentry on duty. Another officer joined them, scanning the area. Pedestrians passed by without noticing anything wrong. No shouting, no running, no obvious threat. Yet the dog's behavior didn't change. If anything, he pressed closer to his owner, subtly pushing him back with his shoulder. That's when the officers began to understand something important. Dogs like this don't act without reason, especially German shepherds with training in their bones, especially dogs who had once worked alongside humans in high-pressure situations. One officer crouched slightly, careful not to break the dog's focus. He spoke softly, not command, but to observe. "He's not scared," he said to his partner. "He's guarding." The word hung in the air. Guarding from what? The owner felt a chill run through him. He followed the direction of the dog's stare. Just a stretch of sidewalk. A parked vehicle. Shadows where the streetlight didn't quite reach. Nothing his eyes could make sense of. But the German shepherd saw more. He smelled more. He knew more. The leash trembled as the dog shifted his weight again, refusing to give even an inch. His loyalty wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, stubborn, and absolute. The officers exchanged a look. One of them raised a hand slightly, signaling to pause the situation. They didn't try to pull the dog away. They didn't escalate. Experience had taught them that when a trained dog breaks normal behavior, it's often because something is already wrong. Minutes passed. The street felt suddenly too quiet. The owner swallowed, his voice low. "Should I be worried?" The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, He scanned the area more carefully, eyes narrowing, senses sharpening. "Let's just say," he replied, "your dog is trying to tell us something." And then, without warning, the German Shepherd took one deliberate step forward, not toward danger, but across his owner's legs, forcing him back another pace. The message was clear now. Do not move. Not yet. The officers straightened. Radios crackled softly. One of them took a few steps in the direction the dog had been watching. Careful, slow, respectful of the invisible line the animal seemed to be drawing. That's when everything shifted. A sound. Small. Almost nothing. Enough to confirm what the dog had known all along. The German Shepherd let out a single sharp bark, breaking the silence for the first time. And in that instant, the police finally understood why this dog had been blocking his owner, and why moving forward could have changed everything. The bark echoed down the street and seemed to hang there, sharp and warning, before fading into the hum of traffic. It wasn't loud and it wasn't wild. It was controlled, deliberate, the kind of bark that meant the dog had reached a decision. The German Shepherd stood taller now, chest forward, eyes fixed, as if he had just confirmed something he already feared. The officers froze where they were. One of them slowly lifted his hand again, this time signaling his partner to stop moving forward. The man holding the leash felt the tension travel straight up his arm. His grip tightened without him realizing it. He trusted this dog. He had trusted him from the very first night he brought him home. And right now, that trust felt heavier than ever. The officer closest to the dog spoke again, quieter this time. "How long have you had him?" The owner took a breath. "Almost a year," he said. "He was calm when I got him. Smart. Too smart sometimes." The shelter said he'd had previous training, but they didn't know much more than that. The German Shepherd didn't react to the voices. His attention never wavered. His ears twitched once, catching something faint, something human ears couldn't pick up. His tail remained low, not wagging, not tucked. Ready. The second officer scanned the parked cars along the curb. One of them stood out, just slightly. The windows were darker. The engine was off, but the hood looked warmer than it should have been under the streetlight. It could have meant nothing, or it could have meant everything. "Has he ever done this before?" the officer asked. The owner shook his head. "No. He's protective, sure, but never like this. He usually listens immediately. Tonight, it's like he's not even hearing me." The officer nodded slowly. He understood. A trained German Shepherd doesn't ignore commands unless instinct overrides obedience. And instinct, especially in this breed, comes from experience. As the officers kept their distance, the owner's thoughts drifted back to the early days with the dog. The first night had been quiet. Too quiet. The German Shepherd had slept near the door, not on the bed, not on the couch, just the door. Every night after that, the same spot. Watching, listening, guarding. It hadn't seemed strange then. Now, it felt like a clue he had missed. There were other moments, too. Small things. The way the dog reacted to sudden movements. How he positioned himself between the owner and strangers without being asked. How he stiffened near certain vehicles, especially at night. The owner had brushed it off as leftover habits from training. But training for what? A soft metallic sound came from somewhere ahead. Not loud enough to alert most people. But the German Shepherd's body tensed instantly. His paws dug into the pavement. The leash pulled tight again. The officers noticed it too. One of them quietly spoke into his radio, keeping his voice calm, neutral. He didn't want to escalate the situation or draw attention. People passing by still had no idea anything unusual was happening. To them, it was just a man, his dog, and two cops having a conversation. But beneath the surface, something felt wrong. The officer who had experience with K9 units took a small step back toward the owner and the dog, respecting the invisible boundary the animal seemed to be setting. "Your dog," he said carefully. "He's trained to block. That's not something they teach in basic obedience." The owner's stomach tightened. Block from what? The officer didn't answer directly. Instead, he watched the dog. From threats, from movement, from stepping into danger. The German Shepherd shifted again, placing his body at an angle now, shielding the owner while still facing forward. It was subtle, but clear. He wasn't just stopping him anymore. He was positioning himself for protection. The streetlight flickered overhead. For a brief second, shadows stretched and changed shape. The parked car ahead looked different somehow, like it had moved when no one was watching. The owner swallowed hard. "He was already trained when I got him," he said. "I didn't ask too many questions. I just wanted to give him home." The officer gave a small nod. Sometimes dogs like this come from places where questions aren't written down. The words sat heavy between them. Another faint sound drifted through the air. Fabric brushing. A shift of weight. Almost nothing. The German shepherd's lips pulled back slightly, not baring teeth, but preparing. His breathing slowed even more. One of the officers glanced at his partner. Their eyes met. A silent understanding passed between them. Whatever was happening, the dog had sensed it before anyone else. "Let's change position," the officer said calmly. "Sir, don't move unless I tell you." The owner nodded, though his legs felt stiff. He trusted the officers. But more than that, he trusted the dog standing in front of him like a living shield. The German shepherd leaned back just enough to press against the owner's knees, reinforcing command without words. "Stay." Time seemed to stretch. Every sound felt louder. Footsteps in the distance. A car passing at the far end of the street. A door closing somewhere behind them. None of it broke the dog's focus. The officer closest a parked vehicle adjusted his angle slightly, staying in the open, not approaching directly. He didn't want to trigger anything too soon. His hand rested near his radio, not his equipment. Calm was key. "Whatever your dog is reacting to," he said softly, "he believes it's not over yet." The owner's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Is he remembering something?" The officer hesitated. "Dogs don't remember the way we do," he said. "But they don't forget either." The German shepherd's ears snapped forward again. Another sound, clearer this time. The dog's muscles coiled, ready, but he didn't move. He didn't break position. Blocking, guarding, waiting. And somewhere in the shadows ahead, something unseen seemed to be waiting too. The air felt heavier now, as if the street itself had become aware of what was unfolding. The German shepherd's focus never broke, but his body language shifted in small, telling ways. His weight stayed forward, yet he kept steady contact with his owner, a quiet reminder that he wasn't alone. The owner could feel the dog's strength through the leash, solid and reassuring, even as his own thoughts began to race. One of the officers slowly widened his view, stepping back just enough to see the whole scene from another angle. From there, the parked cars formed a narrow corridor, shadows layered over shadows. It was a kind of place where sound carried strangely, where movement could hide in plain sight. He had worked long enough to know that trouble didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waited. The German shepherd let out a low breath through his nose, almost a huff. It wasn't impatience. It was recognition. His eyes tracked something invisible, following a path that no one else could see. The owner noticed how the dog's head tilted just slightly, adjusting to tiny changes in sound. It was the same look he had seen when the dog watched birds from the window at home, except now it carried urgency. "Has he ever reacted to cars like this?" the second officer asked quietly. The owner shook his head again. "Only sometimes," he said. "He gets tense around certain ones. Dark windows. Engines that had just been turned off. I thought he was just nervous." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. Nervous wasn't the word he would use. A dog with this kind of discipline didn't panic. He assessed. As they stood there, another memory surfaced for the owner. A night a few months back, when the German shepherd had refused to go down an alley during their walk. He had pulled so hard on the leash that the owner had given up and turned around. The next morning, he'd heard about a late-night incident in that same alley. At the time, it felt like coincidence. Now it felt like a pattern. The German shepherd shifted again, stepping half a pace to the side. Not forward, not backward, just enough to adjust his line of sight. His tail moved once, slow and controlled. The leash trembled slightly as the owner adjusted his grip, trying not to send any signal that might confuse the dog. The officers lowered their voices even more. They didn't want to escalate the situation or draw attention from anyone who might be watching. One of them casually positioned himself, so the owner and the dog were no longer fully exposed to the street, creating a subtle barrier without making it obvious. "Your dog's protecting you," one officer said softly, "but he's also protecting himself." The owner frowned. "What do you mean?" "Dogs with advanced training learn to read situations as a whole," the officer explained. "They don't just focus on one thing. They watch exits, angles, distance." The German shepherd proved the point by glancing briefly over his shoulder, checking behind him, then snapping his attention right back to the shadows ahead. It was a quick scan, practiced and efficient. A breeze moved through the street, carrying a mix of smells. The dog's nose flared, pulling in information faster than any human could process. His ears twitched again. Whatever he was sensing hadn't gone away. If anything, it felt closer. The owner's chest tightened. "He was supposed to be a retired dog," he said quietly. "That's what they told me." "Retired doesn't always mean finished," the officer replied. "Sometimes it just means removed." The words landed harder than the owner expected. Another subtle sound came from near the parked vehicle. This time, one of the officers heard it too. His posture stiffened just slightly. He didn't react outwardly, but the shift didn't go unnoticed by the German shepherd. The dog's gaze locked even tighter, his body angling to block the owner more fully. People continued to pass at the far end of the street, unaware. Laughter drifted faintly from somewhere nearby. Life went on just a few yards away, while this small pocket of tension grew denser by the second. The owner lowered his voice to a whisper. "If he wanted to protect me," he asked, "why not just pull me away?" The officer answered without hesitation. "Because sometimes the safest move is to stand your ground." The German shepherd's training was becoming clearer with every moment. He wasn't reacting emotionally. He wasn't trying to escape. He was controlling space, denying access, buying time. Another officer quietly adjusted his position, ensuring he had a clear view of the parked car without approaching it directly. He noticed how the dog's eyes followed the shift, recalculating the scene in real time. It was a silent coordination, unspoken but undeniable. The owner felt a mix of fear and awe. He had adopted a companion, a protector, maybe even a friend who needed a second chance. He hadn't expected to stand in the middle of something like this, guided by instincts he couldn't fully understand. The German shepherd's breathing slowed further, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He was calm, too calm for a dog facing uncertainty. It was the calm of preparation. One of the officers spoke into his radio again, using careful, neutral language. No codes, no urgency, just information. He didn't want to alert anyone listening in that something was off. The streetlight flickered once more. The German shepherd's ears snapped forward sharply, and his body went completely still, as if time itself had paused. The owner felt the dog press back against him, firm and protective, a final silent warning. Whatever the dog had sensed from the beginning hadn't passed. It was waiting, and so were they. The waiting stretched on, each second pressing harder than the last. The German shepherd didn't blink. His body had gone rigid in a way the owner had never felt before, like a statue carved out of instinct and discipline. The leash felt heavier now, not because the dog was pulling, but because the meaning behind that tension was finally sinking in. One of the officers subtly repositioned himself closer to the owner, lowering his voice so only the two of them could hear. "Whatever happens next," he said, "you follow your dog. Don't second-guess him." The owner nodded, throat dry. He didn't trust his own judgment anymore, not compared to the animal standing in front of him, reading the world in layers humans couldn't reach. The parked car ahead sat silent, but no longer felt empty. The German shepherd's eyes tracked the area around it, not the car itself, but the space beside it, the darkness between objects, the place where someone could stand without being seen. A faint shift of weight echoed again, clearer now, a shoe brushing against pavement, a breath that didn't belong to any of them. The dog's ears locked forward. His jaw tightened. Still, he didn't move. The officers felt it too, that moment when uncertainty sharpens into something else. One of them slowly raised his hand, signaling his partner to hold position. Radio stayed quiet. Every movement was deliberate now. The owner felt his heart pounding against his ribs. He had never been this aware of his surroundings. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every sound felt intentional. He glanced down at the German Shepherd, hoping for some sign, some reassurance. What he saw instead was resolve. Another memory surfaced uninvited. The night the dog had woken him from sleep with a low growl, staring at the front door until morning. Nothing had happened that night. No break-in, no noise, just a dog, alert until dawn. At the time, the owner had laughed it off. Now, regret settled in his chest. The German Shepherd shifted one paw forward, then froze again. It wasn't a step. It was a test. The officer nearest the parked car noticed it. His breathing slowed. "He's narrowing it down," he murmured. The owner whispered back. "Narrowing what down?" "Distance," the officer replied. A cold chill ran through the owner's spine. The air changed suddenly. It was subtle but unmistakable. The German Shepherd caught a new scent, stronger, fresher. His nose flared, and his posture adjusted instantly. He angled his body just enough to shield the owner completely now. No gaps left, no room for error. The officer closest to the car shifted his stance, keeping himself visible but ready. He didn't approach. He waited. Pushing too soon could turn tension into chaos. From the corner of his eye, the owner noticed movement, not a full figure, just a shadow that didn't belong to the streetlight. It slid slightly, then stopped. The German Shepherd let out another low sound, deeper than before. Not a bark, not a growl, a warning meant for one set of ears. The officers heard it. So did the shadow. Time slowed. The street felt sealed off from the rest of the world now, like they were standing inside a bubble of held breath. The distant sounds of the city faded until all that remained was a quiet standoff between instinct and intention. The owner's hands trembled, but the dog's presence anchored him. This animal wasn't reacting out of fear. He was executing something he had learned long ago, something that had once kept people alive. The officer nearest the owner spoke softly, almost himself. "This dog's not guessing," he said. "He knows." A subtle sound broke the silence. Metal brushing fabric. A careful adjustment someone was trying to hide. The German Shepherd's muscles coiled tighter. His paws dug into the pavement. His eyes burned with focus. The officer by the parked car raised his voice just enough to carry. "Sir," he called out, calm but firm. "If someone's there, now's the time to step into the light." Nothing happened. The dog didn't relax. Instead, he leaned back harder into the owner, pushing him a half step away from the street. The message was urgent now. Whatever was coming was closer than before. The officers exchanged another look. This one carried weight. Decision. The streetlight flickered again, and for the briefest moment, the shadow shifted too late. The German Shepherd saw it. His head snapped toward the movement, and his body lowered slightly, ready but controlled, waiting for the final signal that something had crossed a line. The owner's breath caught as realization finally hit him. This wasn't about obedience. This wasn't about fear. This was about timing. The officers tensed, every sense on edge. And in that charged silence, with the dog blocking his owner and the truth finally closing in, the moment they had all been waiting for drew dangerously close. The German Shepherd's body tightened even more. But what happened next wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of lunging or barking again, he suddenly turned his head slightly to the left, eyes locking onto a completely different point down the street. For a split second, his focus split in two directions. That single movement sent a ripple of unease through the officers. "That's not good," one of them muttered under his breath. The owner felt it instantly. The pressure against his legs shifted, not retreating, but redistributing. The dog wasn't just blocking anymore. He was calculating, covering more than one angle. "Is there more than one?" the owner whispered, afraid of the answer. The officer didn't respond right away. His gaze followed the dog's new line of sight. Farther down the street, beyond the parked cars, near the corner where the light barely reached, something felt off. Not movement, absence. The kind of empty space that shouldn't be empty. The German shepherd's ears flicked back and forth now, tracking two separate sound patterns. His breathing remained slow, controlled, but the tension in his frame had doubled. He took a small step sideways, positioning himself diagonally across the owner's body, blocking both paths as best as he could. "He's splitting coverage," the K-9 trained officer said quietly. "He thinks there's more than one threat." The word threat landed heavier this time. The owner's heart sank. He had assumed this was a single strange moment, a misunderstanding his dog was reacting to. Now it felt larger. Planned. Deliberate. Whatever was happening didn't start when they stopped walking. It had started before that. Another subtle sound came from behind them. The German shepherd reacted instantly, head snapping around, body pivoting just enough to keep himself between the owner and the new direction. For the first time, the dog broke his stillness and moved, guiding the owner backward by force of presence alone. "Don't turn," one officer whispered to the owner. "Just follow him." The owner obeyed, stepping back slowly as the dog led without pulling, without panic. It felt practiced, like something the German shepherd had done countless times before. That's when the second twist became clear. The parked car ahead wasn't the main concern anymore. The real danger had been trailing them. The officers spread out subtly, adjusting their positions without drawing attention. Their calm voices masked a sudden spike in urgency. One of them glanced behind, eyes narrowing as he scanned the darker stretch of sidewalk they had just come from. "How long have you been on this route tonight?" An officer asked quietly. "Same as always," the owner replied, barely breathing. "We walk it every night." The officer nodded grimly. Predictable. The word didn't need to be spoken aloud. The German shepherd let out a low, controlled growl now, not loud enough to echo, but deep enough to carry meaning. It wasn't directed at one spot. It was a warning broadcast, meant to be heard by anyone close enough to understand it. The owner felt something cold settle in his chest. His dog wasn't reacting to a sudden threat. He was responding to something that had been building, tracking, waiting. The street felt tighter now, like walls closing in. The distant laughter from earlier was gone. Even the traffic noise seemed muted, as if the city itself had stepped back. One officer quietly spoke into his radio again, this time turning slightly away, shielding his mouth. His tone remained calm, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning constantly. Whatever he was saying, it wasn't routine. The German shepherd suddenly stopped moving and planted himself firmly again, this time directly in front of the owner. His tail was still, his back straight, his focus intense. He stared down the darker end of the street behind them, muscles ready but restrained. The owner followed the dog's gaze and felt his breath catch. There was nothing obvious to see. No figure. No movement. Just shadows layered on shadows. That was the most unsettling part. "Why would he stop us here?" the owner asked, voice trembling despite his effort to stay calm. The officer answered slowly. "Because this is as far as he wants you to go. In either direction." The realization hit hard. They were standing in the safest possible spot the dog could find. Not because it was safe, but because it gave him the best chance to react. A faint sound broke through the silence again. This time, it came from closer than before. Too close. The German shepherd's eyes locked onto a point just beyond the reach of the streetlight. His lips pulled back slightly, not in aggression, but readiness. His body lowered, center of gravity dropping, prepared to move if necessary. The officers tensed. Every instinct told them the situation was escalating fast. The owner felt a strange mix of fear and gratitude wash over him. Whatever his dog had been before this life, whatever training he carried inside him, it was all focused on one thing right now: keeping his human alive. The German shepherd took a slow step forward, then stopped himself, as if holding back by sheer will. He glanced back at the owner for the briefest moment, eyes steady, communicating something without sound. "Trust me." The officers watched closely. They had seen trained dogs before, but rarely had they seen one this controlled, this aware, this determined to manage a situation without chaos. The air felt electric, charged with everything that hadn't happened yet. Somewhere in the darkness, something shifted again, and this time, the German shepherd didn't just sense it, he anticipated it. The German Shepherd finally moved, and when he did, everything happened at once. Not with chaos or noise, but with precision. He stepped forward just enough to draw attention, his body tense but controlled, his presence impossible to ignore. The officers reacted instantly, not rushing, not shouting, but spreading out with calm authority. "Sir," one of them called into the darkness, voice steady. "We know you're there. Step into the light slowly." For a long moment, nothing happened. The street felt frozen, every breath held. The German Shepherd didn't break his stance. His eyes stayed locked, his body ready but restrained, as if he was holding a line between safety and disaster. Then a figure shifted forward from the shadows. It wasn't what the owner had expected. Not a sudden rush, not a threat lunging out. Just a man stepping into the light with his hands visible, movements careful. He looked startled, almost confused, like someone who hadn't realized how close he was to causing a serious situation. "I didn't mean any harm," the man said quickly, glancing between the officers and the dog. "I was waiting for someone. I didn't know." The officers kept their distance, voices calm, asking simple questions, controlling the space. The tension eased slightly, but the German Shepherd didn't relax. He didn't sit. He didn't step back. His job wasn't done yet. The owner watched, heart pounding, trying to understand. The shadow near the parked car made sense now. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. But it still didn't explain everything. Then one of the officers turned back toward the owner and the dog, eyes narrowing with sudden realization. He followed the dog's earlier movements in his mind. The way he had blocked forward, then backward, the way he had repositioned again and again. "This isn't just about him," the officer said quietly, nodding toward the man now standing under the streetlight. "Is it?" The German Shepherd shifted slightly, angling his body once more in front of the owner. His breathing changed, shallow now, focused inward instead of outward. The owner felt it then. A sudden wave of dizziness. His chest tightened, sharp and unexpected, like the air had been pulled out of him. He stumbled half a step forward, without realizing it. The dog reacted instantly. He pressed back hard against the owner's legs, stopping him from moving another inch. He turned his head briefly toward the officers and let out a short, urgent bark. Not a warning this time. A signal. The officer closest to them noticed a change in the owner's face. "Sir," he said quickly, stepping closer. "Are you feeling all right?" The owner tried to answer, but his voice came out unsteady. The world felt tilted, sounds dull and far away. The German Shepherd stayed firm, keeping him upright, supporting him with his body. This was the final piece falling into place. The dog hadn't just been blocking a threat in the street. He had been blocking his owner from collapsing. One of the officers guided the owner gently to sit on the curb. Another called for medical assistance, his tone calm but urgent. The German Shepherd lowered himself beside the owner, staying close, eyes alert but no longer scanning the shadows. The situation shifted completely now. The man from the shadows was no longer the focus. He was questioned calmly, cleared of immediate concern. The real danger had been quieter, closer, and far more personal. As the owner caught his breath, the officer with K9 experience crouched beside him. "Your dog recognized the signs before you did," he said softly. "Changes in breathing, movement, balance. He wasn't just protecting you from the street. He was protecting you from yourself." The owner looked down at the German Shepherd, emotion tightening his chest even more than the physical pain. "He knew," he whispered. The officer nodded. Dogs like him are trained to read their handlers under stress. Even after retirement, that instinct doesn't disappear. The German Shepherd lifted his head slightly, eyes meeting his owner's. There was no fear in them, just relief. Sirens approached in the distance, growing louder. The officers remained steady, keeping everything controlled, grounded. The crisis was passing. But just as the tension finally seemed to fade, the officer added quietly, almost as an afterthought, "There's something else you should know." The owner looked up. "Your dog didn't just react tonight," the officer said. "He's been preventing this for a while. The blocking, the stopping, the rerouting your walks. Those weren't coincidences. The realization hit harder than anything else that night. This hadn't been a single moment of heroism. It had been a long, silent watch. And as the German shepherd rested his head against his owner's leg, the truth became impossible to ignore. He hadn't just been blocking the path. He had been buying time. Time the owner never knew he needed. The ambulance lights painted the street in soft flashes of red and white as the paramedics arrived. By then, the owner was breathing more evenly, though his body still felt heavy and drained. The German shepherd stayed pressed close to him, never leaving his side, eyes following every movement with quiet attention. When a paramedic knelt down to check the owner's pulse, the dog watched carefully, alert but calm, allowing the help he had been waiting for all along. They explained it simply. A sudden medical episode, likely building for days, maybe weeks. Subtle signs the human body often ignores. Fatigue, shortness of breath, small moments of imbalance that seem harmless until they're not. The owner listened, stunned, as the words settled in. He thought about how many times the dog had slowed their walks, stopped him from pushing forward, nudged him to sit or rest when he didn't feel like he needed to. None of it had been random. As they helped him onto the stretcher, the German shepherd walked alongside without being asked, matching the pace, never pulling, never lagging. One of the paramedics smiled softly. "That dog's not letting you out of his sight," she said. The owner reached down, resting his hand on the dog's head. I don't think he ever planned to. At the hospital, things moved quickly but calmly. Tests were run. Questions were asked. Through it all, the German shepherd waited just outside the treatment area, lying down but never sleeping. Nurses passed by and paused, drawn to his steady presence. He lifted his head each time the owner's voice echoed faintly from behind the doors, as if checking in. One of the officers stopped by later, having finished his report. He crouched near the dog, careful and respectful. "You did good," he said quietly. The German shepherd blinked once, slow and relaxed, as if acknowledging something already known. When the owner was finally stable and resting, the officer sat beside him. "We ran some checks," he said. "The man you saw earlier was involved in anything serious. Wrong place, wrong time. But your dog wasn't wrong to be cautious." The owner nodded. "He never is." The officer hesitated, then added, "We also looked into your dog's background a bit more. Turns out he wasn't just trained. He worked with a unit that specialized in handler awareness, monitoring vitals, behavioral changes, early warning signs." The owner closed his eyes briefly, emotion washing over him. "So, when they said he was retired, they meant from a field," the officer said gently, "not from caring." Recovery took time. Days turned into weeks. The owner followed medical advice carefully now, listened to his body in ways he never had before. And through it all, the German shepherd stayed close, adjusting his behavior as his human grew stronger. Walks became shorter at first, slower, then gradually longer again, always guided by the dog's quiet judgment. Something had changed between them two. The bond they shared deepened, layered now with understanding and gratitude. The owner noticed how the dog still positioned himself slightly ahead during walks, scanning the environment, but without the tension from before. The danger had passed, but the instinct remained. Neighbors began to recognize them. Some asked questions. Others just smiled when they saw the German shepherd walking proudly at his owner's side. The story spread quietly, not as a dramatic tale, but as a reminder of something simple and powerful. Dogs see what we don't. One evening, weeks later, they returned to the same street, the same lights, the same stretch of sidewalk where everything had changed. The owner paused for a moment, heart steady, breath calm. The German shepherd looked up at him, ears relaxed, tail moving just slightly. "It's okay," the owner said softly. The dog stepped forward this time, without blocking him. They walked on together. The officers who passed them that night nodded in recognition. One of them smiled and said, "Good to see you back out here." "Thanks," the owner replied. "Wouldn't be without him." As they continued down the street, the owner reflected on how close he had come to missing the signs, how easily life could have gone in a different direction. and how a German shepherd, once trained to protect others, had chosen to give everything to protect one person instead. This wasn't a story about fear or danger in the end. It was a story about awareness, about trust, about listening. Even when the message comes without words. The German shepherd walked with confidence now, his job never truly finished, but no longer urgent. He glanced back once, just to check, just to make sure. The owner smiled. Some heroes bark, some block the path, and some quietly save a life without ever asking for credit. And that German shepherd? He simply did what he was always meant to do.